Hi guys, how's it going? My name is Giulio. Welcome to the 10 Years Podcast. The 10 Years Podcast is my project to document my life, my journey as a musician, as an artist, and as a human being. And I'll try to do my best to release one episode per week. Sometimes I'll release more and document what happens in my life, what is going on around the world and in the music industry world. Today I want to talk about something that has been the topic, the hype in the music industry for the past, I'd say, few months. So Spotify obviously is a platform that everybody knows. But one thing that a lot of musicians, producers, and even record labels have been talking about a lot is the new policy that Spotify will introduce in the first quarter of 2024. So currently is not known exactly how Spotify calculates the payment per stream. There is a few ideas, there's a few people that apparently on YouTube know exactly the so-called Spotify formula. But if you go on Google and you check Spotify 1,000 streams pay, it says that it should be around $3. Now, based on my experience and the experience and feedback of other fellow musicians and artists, we all know that 1,000 streams does not generate exactly $3. At least it generates something between 0.80 and $1. And there is a lot of different factors that come into play, including where the music is streamed, for how long, if it comes from a playlist, or if people are discovering your music on your profile. No matter what, in a reality, in a world where everybody that makes music or creates content complains on how little is the payment when it comes down to streaming, audio streaming or video streaming. In this world, we do have a really drastic change that is on the way. So audio content has been for many, many years the debate of independent musicians and also record labels. But they're trying to figure out, is it really worth to invest money, time, and energy in promoting music on platforms that they seem not to care about the audio content creators? After all, the music industry has always been about trying to profit as much as possible on the talent of content creators, and this extends to actors, dancers, entertainers, you name it. So, when it comes down to Spotify, which is the center of debate for probably a decade of many, many musicians, many artists, from major label artists, from really famous, almost celebrities level artists, to obviously the millions of independent content creators, and I also include obviously podcasts, hosts, spoken word content creators, ASMR, compilation makers, you name it. There's so much audio content on Spotify that right now the algorithm is struggling to understand what you should be listening to. So, in the first quarter of 2024, Spotify announced the introduction of a new policy. And I'm reading from Music Business Worldwide, which is a pretty good website, extremely reliable if you are an independent musician and you want to know what's going on in the music industry and you want to stay up to date with the news and obviously with the many changes that are happening right now. It does say that Spotify confirmed that from the first quarter of 2024 will not pay tracks that have below 1,000 streams. And this should not impact or make anybody upset, because anybody that makes less than 1,000 streams for sure is not relying on Spotify to have a career change and is not relying on Spotify to make a living. Making a living on Spotify, it's anyway a big challenge. You need really big numbers and you need to put a lot of effort when it comes down to work with your team, if you have one, or hiring a PR and marketing person that will push your music, your profile on Spotify to a level where you have a stable amount of monthly listeners and fans. Now, before we go into details about the upcoming policy changes from Spotify, we need to consider a few things. The first thing is Spotify still relevant? Well, that depends on the type of music that you make and what approach you want to have for your career to grow as an artist, to grow as a brand. We live in a time where music is not just something that is given for granted, but it's also something that most of the times is consumed as a background entertainment. And both aspects are not good. If we think that there are a lot of artists out there, like myself, that put time and effort in trying to do their best to capture their performance, to produce music that ultimately will either represent them as a person, as an artist, or try to provide a great level of quality entertainment. I take in account that being a musician and being an artist is not a standard job in any way. It's something that you have no real control, because the art in general, the art world in general, is sustained by the audience. And the audience changes taste. The hype, the trends, they change week by week. So it's impossible to think about creating a sustainable career just by making great music. You will need ultimately to find ways to engage with the audience, to promote yourself, and the most important thing, you need a lot of patience, because things don't happen day by day. You need to invest years before you have enough fans, enough people to show up to your gigs, believe in what you do, and support your journey. In this scenario, Spotify comes in just as one of the many streaming platforms that are out there. And by saying so, obviously, I'm also including the fact that, yes, Spotify is the go-to of many labels to understand if you are happening, if your music is relevant and has the right potentials to reach a wider audience. This is because one of the reasons being Spotify, probably the most popular paid streaming service in Europe and North America. This obviously doesn't compare to platforms like YouTube, which I'm using right now, that reaches billions of users around the world, but also appeals to an audience that is not necessarily direct to music. Is an audience that wants to learn things, so it's the educational topics, is the DIY, is the entertainment, is a platform which is considered and is labeled mostly as a video content platform. Spotify is still associated with the music world. Now, the second policy that Spotify will introduce at the beginning of 2024 is a very, very strict zero tolerance for artists or labels that use artificial streams. A lot of artists, a lot of labels have been using bots or artificial streams to give the impression that the music or a particular song has popularity on the Spotify platform, therefore it should receive attention from booking agents, radio stations, and blogs. The reality is that there are so many artists that have big numbers on social media, big numbers on Spotify, and they do struggle to sell tickets, to go on tour, to sell merchandise, because it's fake, it's not real. And on top of that, it's also expensive. Why a lot of artists would spend money, get the money from somewhere else, from a different source, in order to finance a fake image, a fake career that doesn't exist. They would do that in order to trick the music industry in thinking that their music is good. So, if you are still thinking that bots will dominate Spotify in 2024, then you might have to think that again, because Spotify does not want to deal with bots for several reasons. One reason being is that they will have to pay streams for artists that don't really have people listening to them. So if they are for real going to redistribute the money that they're not paying for tracks below 1,000 streams to artists that are streaming more than 1,000 streams per track, then it means that theoretically we should see an increase of payment per stream. If so, Spotify wants to make sure that those payments go to the right people, go to the people where they have a real fan base. Now, let's not forget the point number 3. And the point number 3 is that there is a lot of music, a lot of releases on Spotify that are not music. They're white noise, they're ambient sounds, they're ASMR, they're music for sleep, etc. Now, Spotify knows that a lot of those tracks have got huge popularity, but also knows that those tracks most of the times come from sources like music libraries or a team of producers that come together and know that there is an audience for that type of sound entertainment. So how fair it is to have those type of releases being paid. Now, Spotify wants to make a distinction, and they've been very clear about their policies for podcasts, for example, at the beginning of 2022. And in 2023, they showed a lot of support for the podcast community. Now, in 2024, probably is going to be the year of kind of like going through a cleanup of the music community, of the community that releases like 60,000, 65,000 tracks per week, or even more sometimes. That's a little bit too much, because even if you have so much music and you have all this democracy about releases, ultimately there's no technology that would allow to have a very reliable algorithm to give you a suggestion that ultimately will help you discover new music. So you'll get stuck eventually in listening to major label releases or stuff that is already happening, is already popping on Spotify. So Spotify would not be considered a platform to discover new music if you are a music lover, if you are an active, attentive music listener. If you're a passive listener, then it's different, because you will be kind of having a radio in the background, and that's okay. But in any other situation which is supposed to be in favor of the content creators, of the musicians, of the producers, Spotify in 2024 must have to take a clear position, because the whole music industry is shifting. Right now it's shifting in a new direction. The new direction is not even clear, but one thing for sure is getting more and more requested by the music community, by the content creators, and it is control. So if I invest my life in creating content for a platform that ultimately will change policies every 3 months, and I don't even know if my music will have any sort of exposure, why should I put my music on that platform in the first place? So right now, if you want to get signed, you know that you need to have your music distributed. And it has to be on music stores, it has to be on streaming platforms. But the debate is, what are those platforms doing for me or for the whole music community? What's the point in having my music on Spotify if I get 2,000 streams, if I get 3,000 streams? And of those streams, how many people actually really care about what I do? Now, there's no way for me to know how many people are really engaging with me, because Spotify is a streaming platform. There's no way of leaving a comment, putting a like. I can see how many people add my music to a playlist, for sure, but is that a meter to know how many tickets I'm gonna sell in the top city in the artist for Spotify or Spotify for Artists app? Is that even a reliable metric? Now, when it comes down to these 3 new policies that Spotify will implement in 2024, the 1,000 streams payout, the policy against bots and fake numbers, and reviewing any audio content which is not technically music, but it's more like white noise or background sounds, it all looks like that Spotify is getting more and more focused on the music community, because they know that they need the music community ultimately. So there is a trend right now, and it's a niche trend, of artists that are investing time, money, and resources in having a full control on their fan base, on their community. So instead of redirecting artists to listen to their music on Spotify, on iTunes, on Deezer, and anyway the music is there, because pretty much anywhere and anybody can distribute music nowadays. Like, it's not, there's no filters. Like, you can go on DistroKid, on TuneCore, on CD Baby. Anybody can put music on a store or on a streaming platform. There's no quality control. And when there is quality control, it's very, very minimal. Unless, obviously, you're signed to a major label distributor. But that's a different story. The majority of people, they just drop music randomly on Spotify, on iTunes, on Deezer. So it's there. It's given for granted that it's there. But why should I redirect people that are actually really engaging with me? Maybe on social media, maybe on YouTube. Why should I send them to Spotify? Why not send them to my website, where they can subscribe to my newsletter, they can see exclusive updates, they can download really high quality files of my music. Very important if you're doing music for DJs, where they need a really high quality file. Where are they gonna go? They're gonna go to Beatport, they're gonna go to Tidal, Juno Download. Yeah, okay, but I have to give a percentage to those platforms. And what are those platforms doing for me ultimately? So the point stands still. It's gonna be ultimately to you to decide what is the best strategy for your music next year and in the following new years. But no matter what, every single content creator, musician, artist will always have to rely to the only thing that not even AI will be able to substitute, which is audience. And the audience doesn't care about how much a content creator or an artist gets paid. The audience doesn't even know what they actually want. Especially the broad mainstream audience is looking just for quality entertainment or for art that can emotionally engage them and trigger something unique that they will want to get, to look, to repeat more and more. So you can do that nowadays from anywhere. If your goal is to get signed, if your goal is to succeed in a genre of music where Spotify is considered relevant, then you need to stay informed about the Spotify policies. On the other hand, if you're an independent artist and your main focus maybe is just to perform live and to get good quality gigs, to tour, yeah, Spotify is important and YouTube is important and stuff like that is important. But the most important thing is how many super fans, how many real people out there care about you and would go and buy a ticket to see you performing live with your band or as a solo artist or as a DJ. It doesn't matter. What people care is something that they can relate to. So any platform that will facilitate connection between you and your potential fans will ultimately survive whatever war is going on between Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, and even YouTube. So my conclusion is, pay careful attention if you're a content creator about how you plan next year, the following years, how you plan your career, because ultimately the platforms will only care about their policies, will only care about their businesses. They're not necessarily there to be able to understand the needs, the individual needs of each music scene or each artist. That's something that only you will be able to take care of. So stay informed, and I hope to see you again in my next podcast episode. Ciao, ciao.